Lunch conférence qui a pour titre le modèle viennois, une vision alternative de l'habitation. J'aimerais vous dire que pour notre conférencière internationale, vous aurez la possibilité de poser des questions, mais comme il y a un enjeu de traduction, je vais vous demander cette fois-ci, pour les gens dans la salle, de vous lever et d'aller trouver les micros. Est-ce qu'on les voit, les micros? En tout cas, sinon, on va venir les installer pour poser les questions à la fin de la présentation. Et donc, malheureusement, pour les gens qui nous regardent à distance, vous ne pourrez pas poser de questions, mais uniquement pour ce segment-là. Alors, pour vous présenter notre conférencière internationale, je vais donc inviter Catherine Fournier.
Merci beaucoup, Catherine. Bon appétit à toutes et à tous. Donc, vous savez, quand on parle d'abordabilité de l'habitation, il y a une ville qui fait figure de référence à travers le monde, et c'est la ville de Vienne. Vienne a un modèle bien particulier où, au début du 20e siècle, la ville a pris un rôle très proactif dans l'acquisition d'une partie du parc immobilier et qui, aujourd'hui, peut revendiquer d'avoir plus de 60% des logements disponibles sur le marché, en fait, du parc général immobilier qui est de propriété publique. Alors, plus de 60%. Là-dessus, il y a à peu près la moitié des logements qui appartiennent à la ville de Vienne elle-même et l'autre moitié est détenue par des organisations publiques, donc des organismes à but non lucratif. C'est pourquoi Stéphane et moi trouvions vraiment intéressant qu'on puisse avoir une invitée internationale bien placée pour nous parler de la réalité de Vienne, la réalité historique, mais également ce qu'ils envisagent comme plan d'avenir. Parce qu'il faut savoir qu'à Vienne, le logement social, ce n'est pas c'est vraiment pour tout le monde. En fait, ça touche même la classe moyenne. Donc, on est très, très heureux qu'à l'invitation de la Ville de Longueuil, notre invité ait décidé d'être parmi nous, donc de faire ce voyage. Et je tiens à remercier d'ailleurs ma collègue Louise Levac qui a travaillé très, très fort pour convaincre cette invitée d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Donc, je vous la présente. Elle a été vice-mairesse de Vienne de 2010 à 2019 et elle a suivi l'évolution récente du modèle viennois en habitation parce qu'elle a été responsable de l'urbanisme, de la mobilité, de la protection du climat, de l'énergie et de la participation publique. Aujourd'hui, elle est fondatrice et directrice de Vienna Solutions. Elle y travaille depuis 2019 comme stratège en transformation urbaine à l'échelle internationale. Elle est également membre du comité d'experts de la mission Horizon de l'Union européenne, climat, ville neutre et intelligente. Alors, j'ai le grand, grand plaisir de vous présenter Madame Maria Vassilakou. Merci.
Bon après-midi à tous. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am very honored and excited to be here with you to share Vienna's experience and, to be precise, to share a story of a city that embarked in social housing 100 years ago and is today an open and inclusive city and a very equitable city. Now, best case Vienna, it's about inclusive social housing and it's about social housing innovation. Now, you may have heard that Vienna is regularly ranked as the world's most livable city. And what I'm being asked all the time is, how did you do it? And not only how did you make it, but how did you do it to stay at the top for so long? So this is a little bit what it's going to be about today. Vienna is a rapidly growing city. It's a Central European city, and by the way, it is, together with Berlin, the two most rapidly growing cities in the German-speaking area. It grows at a pace of approximately 20 to 25,000 people per year. That means that it is a city that is getting younger and younger every year. That means, of course, that we have 20 to 25,000 new opportunities for our city to welcome every year. But it also means that we have to build a small Austrian town within the borders of Vienna every year to accommodate it. And this is the first point I would like to make. It is not about buildings. When we talk about social housing, it's about pieces of city. It's about urban quarters. And it's about using social housing as an opportunity not only to provide people with high-quality, affordable housing, it's also an opportunity to transform the city and perhaps even to repair old mistakes. Now, I mentioned it before, Vienna is a city with 100 years of public housing tradition. And this image that I have brought is from the very early phases. So starting in the early 20s and until approximately 1933, several thousands of high-quality public housing units and buildings and areas were created. What do I mean when I say high quality? I mean high architectural quality. I mean green, vast green spaces. I mean not only housing units, but also infrastructure, everything people needed for everyday life. So little shops and schools and kindergartens, which back then were a sensation, and libraries and whatnot. And I even mean bathing basins within the parks for the children to be able to play with water. This is actually a very good example of what it was back then. You will see how this has been translated into what we do today. So, again, a highly affordable city. 62% of the Viennese live in public or social housing units, thus highly affordable units, a century-long tradition, 500 million approximately Europe spent per year, and a very active love policy to go with it. Here's just very quickly a slide to show you how we arrive at this number. You can see that Vienna has very little ownership. So it's only 25% of condominiums. The rest is actually rented units. And here you can see real free market units are 5%. Then we have regulated rented flats. And then we have 23% social housing flats. And actually, public housing, these belong to the city of Vienna, and then 21% non-profit housing, which is created and owned by cooperatives. That means non-for-profit housing corporations. What you can also see here is that the city has, because of this, a very even socioeconomic distribution. So there are no areas that are exclusively reserved only for villas and very rich people. And there are no areas where you will find only social housing, but no, let's say, no well-off parts of the population there as well. And if we look into our urban development plan, well, we need approximately 130,000 additional units we needed back in 2015. 130,000 additional units by the year 2025. Approximately 50,000 could be created as so-called small potential within the already built city by, adding floors or perhaps building some small buildings where, by coincidence, there may be empty space. But most of it has been created and is being created and will be created in the decades to come in large former brownfields that, and we're really in a privileged position, are quite centrally located. So you can see where they are, and you can see the greatest potentials that we have. These are predominantly former railway areas that are being converted into new urban quarters. The city has given itself the target to subsidize the creation of additional 7,000 units per year and to spend approximately 270 million in subsidizing new construction per year. Clearly, this will have to be raised a bit because of skyrocketing inflation right now. which makes construction prices much more expensive, but we will look at it in a minute. So there's the three-pillar model. Low-cost land, subsidized construction, clearly this is object subsidy, and individual grants. These are for people that still need support in order to enter the system. The financing model, well, it's all about creating a revolving fund. 1% tax on income is collected by national government and allocated to federal states. This corresponds to approximately these 270 million that I have been mentioning before. It's not exactly 270 million. It differs, of course, from year to year. So the city may need to add a tiny bit to that from its own budget means. And then we have revolving means, because the subsidy is basically subsidized low-interest loans to non-for-profit corporations that do the construction, which may be paid back in the process of 25 to 30 years. So we always have money coming back. And then individual grants, who are granted again to applicants and tenants that still cannot afford. And I mentioned it before, what is extremely important is that there is a whole piece of active land policy to go with it. So as of a couple of years from now, the city has taken the decision that 2/3 must be mandatory social housing whenever a development exceeds 150 units. Now this is a wow, this is very radical, even in Europe, as you may imagine. And it meant lots of controversy and quite some discussion. But don't stick to the 2/3. It could be 30%. It could be 50%. It can be adapted to the reality of different parts of the world. The idea, though, is to say any permission, any upzoning for a development that is larger than, example given, 150 units, has to be so and so much % of it subsidized housing. Then it's about a social mix, including free market housing at quota level, and sometimes also even within one and the same building. It's about mixed uses, so no tie cities, no pajama cities, right? We need urban quarters where people work and live, because this makes urban quarters that are full of life. And about indirect land value capture. In our case, upzoning may mean that the developer will be asked to, example given, build a school, or to co-finance green spaces, vast green spaces. And where does the land come from? Well, on the one hand, the city, of course, owns historically reserves, vast reserves, that may be used. It may be former hospitals, it may be former military areas. They do not belong to the city, they belong to the national estate, but are not needed anymore. So there is land, let's say, from the public hand that may be redirected towards social housing. Then, of course, the social housing corporation owned land reserves themselves as well. And again, it's about former brownfields owned by national government, example given former railway areas. And up to a couple of years from now, land price was limited to approximately 220, 230 euro. Because, of course, if land is not affordable, then nothing works. Social housing, the precondition for social housing is affordable land. Now, this has been changed. This is not that rigid anymore. But in the end, it doesn't make sense to buy land at very high prices, because otherwise the rent, which is limited, as you will see in a minute, won't pay off. So I mentioned already what the budget looks like. Again, 267 million are for new housing construction and 102 are for individual subsidies. And these are the income limits, and this is where it gets important again. It's about targeting middle class. So look at these income limits. They are at about 200% of the median income. So it's not about housing just for families that are facing urgency situations. It's about providing affordable, high-quality housing to everybody, to all, to the middle of the society. And I think that this is extremely important to keep in mind, because this is, I think, one of the reasons why Vienna social housing system is so successful. Now, there are different subsidy schemes. Please let us move on quickly. You can see the figures here. 300 euro have been added this year because of, again, inflation affecting construction prices. But what needs to be seen here is that in the end, the city, again, with different schemes, subsidizes the construction of approximately 7,000 units per year. I will be sharing these, so anybody who wants to dwell on these, can have them. And then there are entry fees. And you can also see the monthly rents that the different schemes result in. So here again, it's between 8 and approximately 10 euro per square meter and month. So really highly affordable. And there are entry schemes again, entry fees again, but we will look at them in a minute. Now, I mentioned before, the greater part is about subsidized rents, and then there are different schemes also for subsidized ownership. Let me mention just one that I personally believe to be the most effective and efficient one. It is a scheme where owners do not own their flat. They do not own their own housing unit. They own shares in the collaborative, which then means that when they decide to move out, they can have whatever they paid in before returned, but they cannot speculate. I'm just mentioning this to show that there is a variety of solutions of how to go about this, to produce, again, subsidized rents and subsidized ownership, but to make 100% sure that speculation with this money from the public hand will never be possible. And here is a slide for anybody who obsesses with governance. They can have a look at it anytime. It just shows the very complex system that has been created in terms of governance to manage all this. Then it's about quality. I mentioned this before. So it's about diverse in architecture, ecologically efficient, cost efficient, and participatory social housing. We do this by conducting architectural competitions, social housing competitions, where social housing developers, non-for-profit developers again, together with teams of architects, will compete against each other for one piece of land that they can actually use for social housing. So you can see here the criteria. It's social sustainability, it's architectural quality, it's the business case, to put it in simple words, does it make sense, and it's about the ecology. And this is just a picture that I've brought to share with you. It's a project that I personally just love, and you wouldn't believe it, they didn't win the competition. So the question we would have to pose to ourselves is, this is just another image of it, how good must the ones have been who have won it? Now, I mentioned it before, and this is where I will leave the issue of social housing in terms of the system, and I would like to take you for a brief journey to Vienna, looking at how this is combined to create livable urban quarters as places for life, and how this is used as an opportunity for transformation. Because again, it is not only about providing affordable housing. It's about keeping young people in the city. Who wants to live in a city of rich old people only, if young families have to move out of the city because they can't afford? And what does the city actually look like? And it's about suburbanization, and it's about containing urban sprawl. And it's about the economy, because subsidies that we will give to middle class will mean that what they don't spend for their rent will be spent where? In consumption, in local economy. So actually, it is also subsidizing local economy indirectly. So there are so many reasons why. So this is something that will actually show the why. Vienna has said historically, and this is where you can see it again in our smart city strategy, we want to provide maximum life quality to all of our citizens, to everybody, and not to just the exclusive few who can afford everything. We want to do it by consuming as little resources as possible, and of course, through constant innovation. But then, here is the basic question. What is actually life quality? Everybody talks about livability and life quality, but what is it really? Well, I say a good city is where people live because they want to, and not because they have to. Just set aside the issue of affordability for a second. If our cities do not provide the kind of life we want to have, what young people will do is immediately when they know that the first child is arriving to say, well, now we have to move out of the city, somewhere in the suburbs, buy a little house, so our children can have a happy, healthy childhood. And then this is where they end up. Because once they're there, they will have to take the car to bring the kids to school, they have to take the car to go to work. This is what it does with our cities. And it also means suburbanizations and our cities becoming endless carpets of little houses. Now, nothing against little houses, but I think we can do it the other way around. So what I say is, a city that's good for children is good for us all. Why? Because what is it that we long for our children? We long for our children to be able to grow up in a healthy environment, to move around freely, to have access to nature, to play with water perhaps. And these are all things that we long for ourselves as well. So these are the qualities that we have to provide at the heart of our cities. So this is what it is about. It's about affordability, so young people don't have to leave the city because they can't afford. It's about livability, as I have defined it right now, a city that's good for children. So young people will stay in the city and will say, this is a place that I want to raise my children. And it's about community, so it's about participation. And this is how Vienna creates new urban quarters. At the heart of it, again, is social housing, subsidized housing. What you see here in the backdrop is subsidized housing. What you see here is an artificial lake, by the way. And in the remaining minutes, let me try and take you to one of these urban quarters so that you can see examples of what this really means in real life. Oh, by the way, I was asked to explain before, how long do people have to wait so that they can enter the system? Well, it depends. It's between 3 and 5 years right now. But of course, in cases where they have urgent reasons why, there are different lists, waiting lists. So the ones that have urgent needs can access the system much quicker, of course. So you can see here, the yellow arrow points at the piece that has been already created, and the rest is the railway area that is right now converted into a new urban quarter. So right now, there are cranes everywhere there. So it's about vast green spaces. They have to be open and accessible to everybody, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and allowing for diverse uses. Again, here in the backdrop, social housing. Oh, and one free market, building but you would never know which is which. It's about putting a focus on walking and cycling. It's about a broad social mix at project and quarter level again. It's about integrated mobility design. So, example given, the building with the pink balconies and the building beside it have a strong focus on cycling. Have been created, example given, with broader elevators so that you can take the lift up until in front of your flat and you can park it there, example given. Excuse me. It's about integrated mobility solutions, so high-level public transport access, in many cases, car sharing within the quarter, and a welcome gift, which is an annual card for public transport, just to give you an example. And look at this. This is social housing in Vienna. Very often you may find buildings with swimming pools on the rooftop, because if people decide that they do not need to have garages underneath the building, there is enough money left. The most expensive part is building underground garages. So you can take this money and spend it on luxury for everyday life that I personally find much more important. It's about collaborative housing projects. So the most innovative projects are projects where the house is designed by the tenants themselves. And these prove to be community magnets, because one of the problems we all have is that when we embark in social housing and in new urban quarters, they feel sterile in the beginning, right? It takes some time it takes decades until they get this patina, this urban feel that we all love. So we have found out that collaborative housing projects mean that you have an active community that will start little shops at ground floor, example given, and will help create a place that's full of life state from the beginning. It's about space for community action, so you can see here community gardening. And then it's about a grant scheme that we have introduced, a community grant scheme, that actually enables and supports community action. So community ideas can be very, very easily and accessibly with a small grant, brought to life. Let me, because I have only 4 minutes left, so then it's about realizing that new urban quarters have to be connected, example given, if we are creating vast green spaces, we connect these green spaces with each other, with already existing spaces via green boulevards, thus creating a green network throughout the entire city. So again, it's about using subsidized housing and the creation of new urban quarters as an opportunity for transformation and repair in places, in parts of the city specifically, where we have little green. And then it's about citizen involvement, and here's just a few images that show you how this is done. So it's done on a mobile basis. We go to where the people are. It's done, of course, online, and empowering and involving local community to use the area for development before it is developed, in the phase that it is still planned. For different actions, here you can see summer cinema, so that they can develop a sense of ownership, of belonging there. And the new development is not something that will ruin their life quality, but it's something that they actually can also actively design, co-design. Open ideas competitions. In this case, we even asked citizens to participate with their ideas, and this is the result. And cooperative planning processes, which then mean that you may even end up with high-rise buildings without controversy, because they have been designed and agreed upon together. So here again, we have examples of very high density, of subsidized housing, even in high-rise buildings, with high architectural quality, with balconies, and with the people in the overall vicinity having taken part in the design phase, so that, again, it is accepted and agreed upon with everybody without controversy. Then last but not least, I mentioned schools. It's about having, in this case, a renowned Austrian architect designing schools. It's multi-generational school campus that are created, opening up in the green spaces so that children can walk to school every day, and that in many cases are built again on the basis of urban contracts with financial contribution from the developers. So, with only 1 minute to go, I will have to take a shortcut and come to the end. The takeaway, what is the takeaway of all this? What can be useful, I think, what can be shared with other parts of the world? I think it's about realizing that social housing is a public-private partnership, on the one hand. It's about realizing that it's about creating a revolving fund and seeing to it that the means that are given out as subsidy return on the long term, so the fund is never empty. It's about land policy. It's about collaboration. Today we all speak of multi-stakeholder collaboration. I would say it's about collaborating with different parts of society, with the citizens, with businesses, with construction companies, with developers, to create something together. And last but not least, it's about vision, leadership, and the courage to embark in something for the first time, even though everybody says this won't work. I would say just go ahead and do it. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. That was really, really inspiring, interesting. Alors, s'il y a des gens qui ont des questions, on a vraiment quelques minutes pour les questions. Vous allez voir, Sarah et Elisabeth sont dans la salle. Simplement, levez la main. On va venir vous voir avec le micro. Est-ce qu'on a déjà des gens qui ont levé la main? Je vais voir. OK, on va venir vous chercher. Parfait. OK. Are you going to have access to translation? Or you want me to translate for you?
I would like you to translate,
OK,
please.
I'll try that.
Je pourrais poser la question en anglais aussi.
Merci, vous êtes bien bon avec moi.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this very inspiring presentation. Merci aux organisateurs qui ont rendu cette présentation possible. I would like you to tell us a bit more about the non-profit, not-for-profit housing developers that seem to be such important partners of your model. We have a pretty strong, for North America, one of the strongest not-for-profit housing sectors in Quebec. We're not yet at the scale of what you're speaking of. Can you tell us, in the projects that are being developed currently in Vienna, what proportion is publicly owned, municipally owned, and how important are the nonprofit partners in that delivery? And what does the partnership look like in practice and in enabling those groups to be able to deliver on this bold vision and these big ambitions? Thank you.
Well, in Vienna we have approximately 10,000 units developed per year, approximately. It may be a little bit more, and approximately 7,000 are subsidized housing, and the tendency moves towards a little bit more raising numbers in free market housing. Now, I think that at the heart of everything lies a business model that is profitable. So, in the end, there are really numerous non-for-profit housing corporations. Most of them have resulted out of historical cooperatives that belong to unions, to political parties even, to chambers, to banks, to all kinds of associations that you may be able to imagine. But also, in sometimes to large companies. Example given, the Austrian Railway Company owned such a cooperative, or the national state owned such a cooperative to provide civil servants with affordable houses. This all has to do with the time when people still understood that housing is actually there to provide workers, labor, with affordable, places to live, and that it's not an asset. So they felt the obligation to create cooperatives to embark in this. So they're still there, and then, because the model is so flexible and profitable, even free market developers will create non-for-profit or limited profit branches and embark in social housing as well, which is very good because then they will mix both branches in one and the same development.
Merci beaucoup. On va prendre une autre question. Puis ne gênez-vous pas, là, je peux essayer de la traduire si vous voulez la poser simplement en français. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres gens qui ont levé la main? Ah, il y a un monsieur ici à l'avant. On va venir vous porter un micro, ce ne sera pas long. Juste ici, Elisabeth, voilà. Peut-être vous présenter aussi, dites qui vous êtes, comme ça on peut...
Mon nom est Vassilios Karidodianis, conseiller municipal de Ville de Laval. My question is, how does this kind of housing, social housing, which your concept of social housing completely differs from the North American concept of social housing, and bravo to the Vienna model. How does this model affect poverty levels and crime levels? Are they lower than the average around the world or other cities of same size, etc., or higher, similar?
Okay. Well, I would say that Vienna is a city that, in comparison to other parts of the world, but also within Europe, has very low poverty levels and has also, of course, very low, let's say, severe crime levels. So yes, it is a safe city, and I think that it is also a safe city because of this even socioeconomic distribution that I have been talking about before. And if we had time, I would actually show you where migrants live, because then you would see that migrants, because of this, live in central parts of the city, which is also very good, as opposed to, example given Paris, yes. And other parts of the world where you have, migrating population living in the suburbs, and we all know what then this means. Because in the end, housing is also about immediate access to labor, right? Pretty much as mobility. So either you can create affordable housing so that people can practically walk or cycle or take the public transport near the place that they work. Or if you don't do so, then, okay, we all know what then happens. So anyway, this is how it works. And of course, there is homelessness in Vienna as well. But because the city has taken the decision that we want zero homelessness, there is really nobody that has to sleep on the street. This is also extremely important in Vienna. There are enough shelters for people so that everybody can have a roof above their heads when they go to sleep. And there are additional schemes that I could not touch upon today, that will actually bring homeless people back into housing. But first it is assisted, supported housing, and later on it is individual housing in subsidized units. Again, I think the point I'm trying to make all the time is that if we think of social housing as something that is targeting only, the socioeconomically weak within our societies, then it's stigmatized. And very often you end very quickly in a discussion of why spend so much money. So let's do something that is cheap and quick. And I think that this is so wrong. It's all about us. Us. Well, some of us earn too much, but the rest, okay? So it's about us, it's about people like us, and even more so, it's about our children who will not be able to afford decent places to live if things continue this way. So it's about middle class in times of skyrocketing market prices.
Thank you so much. Est-ce qu'on peut l'applaudir, Madame Vassilakou?
Thank you.
Thank you. It was so inspiring. And obviously, it's helped solving so many other problems. Alors, maintenant, je vais laisser la parole au maire Stéphane Boyer pour clôturer cette conférence. Ensuite, on aura un petit 10 minutes de pause. On vous laisse ça pour avoir le temps d'aller reporter vos écouteurs et votre émetteur de traduction pour recommencer ensuite à 13h pile pour le deuxième panel. Allez-y, M. Boyer.
Merci. Madame Vassilakou, j'ai juste envie de dire « Wow! This is so inspiring. » Yes, we can applaud. Je pense que ça démontre toute la pertinence dans le cadre d'un sommet comme aujourd'hui, de ne pas juste regarder ce qui se fait au Québec, mais aussi d'ouvrir nos œillères et de voir ce qui se fait ailleurs dans le monde. Et pour moi, au final, on pourrait dire 60% de logements publics, parce qu'au final, c'est simplement ça, c'est du logement qu'on enlève l'équation de rendement privé. Et moi, je retiens 3 choses de votre présentation. La première, on ne construit pas des bâtiments, on construit des quartiers. Que ces quartiers-là, il ne faut pas que les gens les choisissent parce qu'ils sont obligés, parce que c'est la seule option qu'ils peuvent se payer. Il faut qu'ils les choisissent parce qu'ils veulent y vivre. Puis dernièrement, surtout, ce que je retiens, c'est que ça prend une vision à long terme. Et des fois, c'est peut-être un défaut qu'on a, tout gouvernement. On essaie de faire des projets pour tout de suite, maintenant, avoir des rendements immédiats. Mais on voit que cette stratégie-là, elle est intéressante parce qu'elle s'est développée sur des décennies. Et moi, je trouve ça extrêmement inspirant, je pense, pour l'ensemble de nos villes, d'avoir une telle approche, une telle vision à long terme. Donc, sur ce, merci beaucoup.